Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us and learn about how to avoid becoming a victim of financial abuse. My name is Isabel Behar and I'm the receptionist for Barker and Barker Law Firm. We have been in business for over 40 years. We have 8 full-time attorneys and 1 of counsel, along with dozens of highly qualified support staff that are happy to serve you at any time. We have multiple locations all throughout the state of California and have the ability to conduct meetings in person or through virtual means such as this. Your presenter today is Larry Koppenbarger, and he is one of 8 attorneys within our firm. Larry's name may sound familiar, and that is because he is the only son of Lloyd Koppenbarger. Larry specializes in estate planning and is one of the main attorneys you will meet with if you are in need of establishing or reviewing an estate plan. Larry works mainly in our Orange County and San Diego areas, but with new Zoom technology, he can meet with anyone, anywhere. Larry is a wonderful attorney who knows the ins and outs of estate planning and is dedicated to serving every client to the best of his capabilities. Here he is, Larry Koppenbarger, everyone.
Well, Isabel, thank you. And I don't know if we can have interaction with this session. Generally, I like to have feedback, but I didn't ask. Forgive me for not asking ahead of time whether we could actually have question and answers. Well, forget that. We'll go ahead and go through the session. The main focus will be talking about the steps we can take to protect ourselves and others from financial abuse, and then also to review some of the fundamental areas that tie in to the things you need to do to avoid to becoming a victim of financial abuse as we get older or become a little out of touch with what we're doing. So again, it's good talking with all of you. The only thing I miss is not being able to see you. So anyway, that's fine. There's a couple of essential documents you need to have in place as a foundation to making sure that you're protected. You need to have in place the Advanced Healthcare Directive, which allows you to designate those people who you desire to make medical decisions for you. So that if you're in a position where someone needs to make a decision, the people you want to make it can make it for you and not some stranger. The durable power of attorney for finance can be set up. You need to have that set up to allow someone to act on for financial reasons for you. You need to have a will, possibly need to have a will, and you possibly need to have a trust set up depending on your circumstances. And let's cover some of that. Now, what is the power of attorney? How does it function? It allows you to delegate to someone, either now while you're competent or if you become incapacitated, the power to act on your behalf. And the questions you have to ask yourself relating to that power of attorney is, first, what I just mentioned, do I want it to be effective now? Do I trust the people I've named? And do I want to give them the authority immediately to act? Or do I want it to only come into effect when I lose the ability to act? That's what we call a springing power of attorney. And there are a couple of ways of setting that up. One is by, if you've worked with our firm for any time, you know our preference is for you to set up a committee of people who know you and let that committee of trusted individuals determine when you're no longer competent. The other issue you have to look at is, what power are you giving them? What power are you giving to the person who you're naming? Do you want to give them the broad powers to handle anything and everything? Or do you want to limit it to certain specific items? Which, if you're paying attention, that means you could actually have numerous powers of attorney. One to deal with certain rental property, one to deal with everything else, as an example. And then you need to determine, or need to be aware, that the power of attorney can be revoked at any time. So if you do lose capacity, or if you determine that someone is not who you think they are, you can set it up so it can be revoked and put someone else in there who you do trust. how do you plan for incapacity? First, we started off dealing with the Advanced Healthcare Directive, addressing the common issues of, the big one, end-of-life decisions, and then the lesser decisions as to what power do you want to give the people who you trust. Hire and fire your doctor, move you from one facility to another, to determine who can visit you or not visit you. The durable power of attorney, we talked about that just a second ago in terms of what language do we want to have in there. Do we want to make it broad? Do we want to make it narrow? Do we want to make it effective immediately? Or do we want to make it effective only upon incapacity? And the issue there is, do we have a committee that does it? Or do we fall back on having the doctors do it? Or do we require court? And all of that is possible. But the good news is you determine that. If you have a revocable trust or even an irrevocable trust, you can put in language in that instrument where you can determine how you're determined to be incapacitated. And then finally, within the planning, particularly with the trust, setting forth the language about how your assets are to be managed for the rest of your life and who's going to do it and what kind of guidance you're going to give them. Be aware, one other thing, and again, this is kind of laying a foundation, is do you need protective planning? Obviously, that's the part of the discussion, is avoiding abuse or financial abuse. But one of the reasons I've run into where people make these decisions where they think they're avoiding abuse and they're actually running into it is because they're making decisions based on fear. And what are those fears generally? How do they manifest? Well, generally it's dealing with, it's going to cost a whole heck of a lot of money to do this, that, or the other, so I better do something to put my house in order. Well, when you're dealing with long-term care planning, if you ever had to go into skilled nursing, we know the cost is going to run anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000, $16,000 a month, which is a very strong motive for any of us, and I'll put myself in that camp with people who don't have knowledge to make decisions that are running into the trap that might be set where someone can take advantage. The good news is you can put together your planning now, preventive planning, to deal with that possibility of having to go into skilled nursing so that it ceases to be a fear factor. And under California law, and we're focused here on California because, first of all, we're in California, but California gives us the broadest ability to protect of any of the states I'm aware of. And the opportunity is there if you're concerned about skilled nursing issues, if you're concerned about depleting your estate, if you're concerned about having the state being too much involved in your finances, you have the ability to plan to avoid that and to have your wishes carried out, and to do two things. If you're married, make sure your spouse is protected as long as he or she is living. And then if you're single, to make sure that the people you trust are the ones actually carrying out your instructions. So if it's your wish to stay at home as long as possible, you may say, I'm going to put planning together so that if I need to go into skilled nursing, I can, but between now and then, I want to make sure that the people who really share my desires are the ones managing what I have and utilizing it to the maximum extent possible to keep me out of the facilities. But if I do need to go, have the planning in place. Now, who do you name to act on your behalf? Let's say you're at, this says it's limited to in-home, but let's not limit it to in-home. Be careful who you select to act as a caregiver. It says here, as you can see, do a background check. Check their credentials And it says, if possible, no, check their credentials. Make sure that that they have the skills that are necessary to meet the needs of the family. Referrals are always best, but even with referrals, double check. Check the background. And then, in addition to that, and it's not written here, but from my experience, if you'll do something as simple as what you would have done when you had little kids, and right now start planning the babysitter's note, so that if you do bring someone in, you're going to do all the checking, but make sure those little things that, at least in my experience, little things that can create all kinds of trauma, thinking something's been stolen or things have been lost, or not having the right decisions made as to how you're being cared for. Set it up now. Know what you're going to do. Have a decision made that if you have jewelry, that jewelry is always placed in a specific area, and preferably in a safe or something that other people can't get into. But one of the biggest things I've run into over the years, and it's consistent, that as we get older, we become forgetful. Not always, but sometimes. And I've seen, particularly in caregiving situations, that invariably the person being cared for is fearful that their jewelry or their cash or their bank accounts are being stolen. And you need to think right now, if you're thinking in terms of being the person being cared for, or if you're going to be the caregiver, you need to think right now, how are you going to deal with this so you can avoid that fear factor that comes in to where people believe they're being taken advantage of. So you've done everything right, but now the person you've hired to come in is being accused of writing checks. It's not true, but that's what's being accused. Or more commonly, the jewelry's lost, and it's not lost, it's just got misplaced because you moved it around. So set up a plan right now to deal with that possibility. Hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but if it does, set up that babysitter's note, set up that master plan to first choose the caregiver, but then lay out a plan as to how the stuff you have is going to be tracked so that you're not thinking it's been stolen every 5 minutes. I know I rambled a little bit on that, but that's something that is very important to address. Oftentimes you're going to be asked to sign many documents, particularly when it comes to caregiving. I'm going to encourage you to make sure, obviously make sure you know what you're signing. And as a Koppenberger client, or if you're related to a Koppenberger client, bring the document to us and let us review it for you. And then if you're an Access member, we can let you know. Probably won't be a charge for it. If you're a friend of an Access member, you can bring that to us, and we can give you a legal opinion as to what's appropriate to sign and what not to sign. But absolutely don't sign anything until you've had an opportunity to, don't sign anything unless you understand it. If you don't understand it, obviously stay away from it. Here's the big one. Be careful what you give away. Many of you are probably aware of the phone scams that have been going around, the IRS calls that are claiming that if you don't pay something now that you're going to end up going to jail, or they're going to be filing claims against you. These claims are not new. It's just another version of many of the scams that happen. I've had clients where they've received calls where they think it's a grandchild, and in reality it's not. And the grandchild is claiming they're in another country, they're in jail, or they're sick, or something is happening to them where they need you to send them money. And most people, they go back to the IRS scam. There's a generation, particularly the baby boomer generation and before, that has a very focused desire to make sure they have no debts. And the scammers take advantage of that. If you have a parent, or if you're in that situation where you're receiving these calls, ahead of time, just have by the phone. Don't give anybody your social security number. Don't give them a check. Don't give them a credit card, because that's what they want. So oftentimes, as we start losing our mental capacity, having little reminders will help. So I'm just throwing out something there. But again, the people who want to take advantage of you, they don't care if they're going to make you broke. So plan ahead and deal with running through these scenarios with family members ahead of time so that they're not tricked into giving money away. In fact, I told a client one time where we went, they had a parent-grandchild in Las Vegas in jail. And of course, I knew immediately it was a scam. But I was able to tell them if they truly were in jail, would they be calling you, or would they be calling their parent? And obviously they'd be calling the parent if it was a valid issue. But in this case, I was able to show them that it was fake, and they didn't end up paying the $5,000 that they were getting ready to pay because they had a kind heart and they thought it was someone they loved and care about. So just set up a plan ahead of time, but trust your instincts. If you don't think it's right, it's probably not right. And there's never a problem if you delay doing something. You can always wait a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks. Bring other people from your family into the discussion. But just have in your mind ahead of time, I'm not doing anything now. I'm only going to do it after I have confirmation in my spirit, and I have confirmation with the people who love and care about me. I'm not going to do anything until they agree. So just be careful don't give anything away. Don't give them information. And that's a strong recommendation that you need to keep in mind. Now, protecting some of your assets. You can remember in the past, just looking at what's on the screen, used to be we would have a hard copy bill. We would have a regular phone at home. We would communicate face to face, and we would have regular photographs for our memories. Where do we have it now? Now it's all on our cell phone. I wish I had my cell phone handy. Literally on my one phone, I've got all my contacts, and you do too probably. I've got all the billing information. I have access codes. I have thousands of, and you have, I'm sure, thousands of photos that keep track of your life. So how do you protect those? How do you deal with your computing devices? I mentioned my iPhone. Data storage devices, I'll have to go through some of those. The where do you electronically store your information? If you're like many people, you have many different social media and email user accounts, and each of those accounts have a password. You have domain names that go to websites, and you may have other intellectual property that you need to address. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because if you don't have a place that's safe to store it, then anybody can get to it. And we're going to talk about how to protect it. The key point is to have, one thing that I find helpful is to have a master place for all information, what we're calling here a master key for all your online accounts. But I want to caution you, maybe you should have 2 master keys. My wife and I were traveling overseas 2 years ago, and I had my cell phone in my bag. And in the bag, I had a bottle of water and a t-shirt. And the bottle of water, it turned out, was leaking, and it happened to be pretty hot. And the phone didn't get wet, but it got steamed. and that steam destroyed the phone. And because I didn't have a backup, what you see here, the iCloud or the Google backup, I ended up losing all of the information I had on that phone because literally the steam destroyed it. And even going back to Apple, they were not able to recover but a little bit of information. So keep your information on your phone, but maybe have a separate backup on a thumb drive. Maybe have a separate backup the old-fashioned way. Put it on in a notebook that you can keep in a safe place, either in a safe or in a place in your house where people you love and trust can find it. You know, I have a client who has a financial business, and in her business, she has hundreds of different passcodes she has to keep track of. She has the master key for everything, but as a backup, she keeps everything online or written down so that when she changes a password, the first thing she does is she changes it within that book so that if she loses the electronic, which she does next, she still has it covered. Make sure you have the ability to reset your passwords. That's important because you should, I think from a security standpoint, change your passwords every 30 days at minimum. I know that sounds crazy, but in this day and age with the hackers' ability to access your information, I think they were talking the other day about the Chinese program TikTok. Well, for all you know, if you have that on your phone or on your computer, that program by itself is accessing all your data, which is a reason you want to have your information kept separate so that your online activity will not disclose or uncover private information that you don't want anybody else to know. And be aware that if you have a Google account or Yahoo or any of the regular mail accounts, that some of those are deactivated by non-use. So maybe make a note to come in and utilize them from time to time so that you don't end up getting locked out because of non-use. Online accounts, why do they matter? They matter because, as you've seen, particularly with this COVID circumstance, we are becoming more of an online society. I'm not going to give in to the idea of meeting face to face, but to some degree, it's been a pleasure to be able to talk with clients using Zoom, much like we're doing now, except we're not able to communicate back and forth. But the social media accounts, to some degree, unless we change our way of doing things, are taking over. And it's taking away our needs, is creating more of a need to have backup systems. And we've mentioned a few of them here, the Google Drive, the Dropbox, and there are, of course, other iCloud services you can get. There are people who have online banking accounts and the digital currency. Of course, the most common digital currency is the Bitcoin. And that one in and of itself is an example of being careful, because what is the purpose of Bitcoin? What is the purpose of the security of online banking? So no one but you can get to it. There was a case in Canada, and I'm not sure how it ultimately came out, but a man died who had $190 million plus. I think that was the amount, maybe it was Canadian dollars, but 190 million in something, currency, either Canadian or US currency, in Bitcoin. He died and no one had the password. So literally they had to try to figure out a way to break through the encryption to get to his money. And I don't think they were successful. But I think we all understand that with the online society that we are entering into, that you need to take into account your online accounts. You need to address it in your planning. And you need to have a way so that in the event of your incapacity or in the event of your death, someone can access it. What happens, in the event of your death? Many of the social media accounts don't have a default. Sometimes in our planning, we don't address it. The one thing that makes social media easy is, frankly, they don't know who you are. And if you have an access code, doesn't matter, anybody can get into it. So that's a positive. It's also the negative, because what happens when you're gone? Is everybody going to know you're gone? Maybe not. So what if a hacker or some stranger grabs your account and then starts using it to make money off of unsuspecting friends or family who might be, because they're unaware of your passing, send money or give information that they shouldn't be giving. So anyway, enough on the online accounts, but you understand how important that is. How do we store online information, or ways to store the information offline? The safest way to store information is to keep it disconnected from any online connection. In the screen, you can see the Koppenberger & Koppenberger white thing there is actually a flash drive. And with our clients, whenever we're doing documents, when they've completed them, we'll scan them, and we'll have a scanned version on our computer, on our system, which is in the cloud, but we'll also put a scanned version that's encrypted on the flash drive, which the client will then take and utilize to have a safe copy whenever they want it. So I would encourage you to have flash drives if you need more backup information, particularly if you're doing digital videos or digital pictures. Buy a Seagate or one of those other backup drives. In this day and age, you can get terabytes of information, which is a huge amount. There are other hard drives and memory cards that you can get, but get them, put them away in a safe place so that they're not lost, so the data is not lost in the event of your incapacity or death. It can be saved in either circumstance. You want to include your digital information in your estate planning. And that could be as simple as, in our planning, we'll create schedules for assets. And you can actually create a separate schedule for digital assets. So here's my Google account, and this is the name on it. Here's my website. Here's my web page. And I've been beating this to death, but make a list of the passwords and the online accounts that you have. Inventory it all. I mean, most of it, if you're like me, you're overwhelmed with the amount of data and the amount of information that's available. Think about how that would impact the people you love and care about, and how much more difficult it is for them because they don't have a clue where to start. And then, of course, remember to update your information and the passwords often. And I'm suggesting that you do it at least once a month to keep everything current. So as a final reminder, and I know we've rushed through this fairly quickly, I think I still gave you a lot of information, but update, make sure you establish and update your estate planning. And as you've learned from what's going on with COVID, do it now. Don't wait. There's always, when I was a youngster, there was a thing called we always say we would get around to it. And somebody had the bright idea to create this wooden coin that was said on it, around to it. It was kind of a way of directing us to get it done now and not waiting. And I would encourage you to do so. Come in and review your planning. If you know it needs to be updated, still come in for a review. Because oftentimes we'll go through things with you that you have not thought of. And actually, you'll find it desirable to add things to your planning that you hadn't even thought of. Invite your family and friends to the next webinars if you found this one to be beneficial. And I'm arrogant enough to think that you did. Share your experience. Let us know how this went for you, what your experience is. I think in the future, I'm going to try to figure out a way to make sure we can get feedback. And then I think that would be an enhancement. Actually, there is one question. So yeah, go ahead and type your question, and I'll definitely, I know I'm sending an answer to a private one, but for all of you, if you have a question, go ahead and send it within limits. We had set aside from 30 minutes to an hour to go through this. And the question I'm looking at says, is it a good idea to give a task list to caregivers and also a contract? I am so glad you brought that up because it reminded me of something that I forgot to include. The answer is it's always a good idea to give a task list. It's not like you're being a slave driver. All you're doing when you create the task list is to help them actually make their life easier and just work with them and work alongside them. And I would encourage you to have a contract, which comes to the next point I want to make. When you're hiring people to come in and caregive, don't pay under the table. Do it above board. Have agreements. Pay the taxes. If they're working for another company, make sure you have the contracts and agreements that show that the taxes are being paid. I've had more than one occasion where I've told people to do exactly what I just mentioned to you. They didn't. And sure enough, when the person being taken care of passed away, guess who got sued? And guess who had to pay a substantial amount of money that they shouldn't have had to pay because they didn't do things right the first time. And then someone's making a point, and this is a good one, be careful with agencies. In California, they changed the scope of practice for caregivers, meaning the caregivers could not be an independent contractor. I think that's what they intended. Also, all agencies are also supposed to be employers. That's true. And if they are employers, that's good. So that you don't end up having to pay the Social Security taxes and the overtime and the other things that come along with it. And then someone made a comment, this happened to me through personal experience with my mom, and that is a common experience. So going back to the main question, actually addressing this one, if you're working through an agency, make sure that their employees are covered as employees and are not considered independent contractors, because in California, they are not independent contractors, unless there's an exception, and I wouldn't count on one. And then another statement, it says, our oldest daughter is now estranged and cut out of our will. Our other children are worried that she will sue when she finds out. What can we do to prevent this from happening in our trust? Well, you can't keep her from suing, but what you can do is make it clear your reasoning for cutting her out. Oftentimes, it's just a matter of course, when I'm setting something up where a client is wanting to disinherit a beneficiary, we'll just put in standard language. Something like, we're cutting out Mary not because of lack of love or affection, but because she's already adequately provided for. Now, that doesn't keep her from suing, but it does put her in a position that unless she has a good reason for suing, it's going to cost her a ton of money. In other words, unless you are incompetent, or unless you're being abused, or unless there's some other basis for her to bring the action, undue influence, she's not going to be successful, and she's going to have to hire an attorney to accomplish that, which in most cases people are not willing. When they know they're wrong, they're not willing to throw good money after bad. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn the session over to Isabel. Isabel, as she identified herself, as our receptionist. She's the one you will hear from when you're confirming appointments, and she's the one who will actually take care of you today, or when you're ready to schedule a time. And I would encourage you, if you found this to be beneficial, it looks like there are some more questions, and I don't want to run away without answering them. And then there's one here that says info, if it says APS, I'm not sure what that is meaning, is called by someone, they cannot tell you who called. That's probably the Adult Protection Services. This person happened to be a mandated reporter, but this does happen. I was a healthcare power of attorney. That's right. When you're dealing with an abusive situation, they will not disclose information to you. Where do we make it clear? A will or trust? Well, you'll make it clear in a number of places. If you're talking about, I think, Nancy, you were discussing the beneficiary who's being cut out. In many times we'll do it in both. We'll put it in the will, we'll also put it in the trust. Even though if you know about trust, the trust effectively controls everything, but out of an abundance of caution, I like to cover it in both documents. Not that it's always necessary, but it doesn't hurt to have too much. And then somebody made a comment, just wanted to thank you. This was great. So I don't know if that was a plant, but Maria, I appreciate you enjoying this. And I'll give you 1 more minute for any questions. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to turn you over to Isabel and let her let you know what to do next. And you all have a great day. And Isabel, thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Great job. That was a lot of good information. As some of you may know, the Koppenbarger Law Firm has been in business for over 40 years. As I mentioned previously, we have 8 full-time attorneys and 1 of-counsel attorney, along with 30 support staff members that are here to serve your every need. As your receptionist, I am the first person you will talk to upon calling our office. Whether you have a question or are in need of an appointment, I will be more than happy to help you. We can meet with you in one of our 7 offices that are located all over the state of California, or through virtual means such as Zoom. Our team will be sending out an email with the recorded webinar so you can share it with your friends and family. As Larry stated, it is extremely important to have the proper estate plan in place so you don't become a victim of financial abuse. Because you tuned in today, you are eligible for a complimentary consultations with one of our certified specialists. Whether you need to establish an estate plan for the first time or need to review your existing estate plan, your consultation is completely free. Remember, we are here to help you through all stages of your life, and we appreciate being your expert referral for all your professional needs. We look forward to serving you and your family for many years to come. Thank you, and we hope you have a great day.